Wow. I'm drinking a wine I've never had before.
Oh, really? What kind?
Oh, I'm not going to tell you. So we get to the reveal.
Okay.
Coming up on the Tall Mike Wine Podcast.
It says it's 94%, I'm going to butcher this, Albariño. And
Very nice. You said it perfectly.
Perfect. Okay. And this
you could
one
have rolled your R if you wanted to be more
Albariño.
Where do you see your podcast progressing to? Other media? TV? Is there a screenplay in there somewhere? And I only ask that because you are in LA and everybody's writing a screenplay.
Now I fall into that stereotype, a millennial that sits at home and would prefer to pour myself a glass of wine now than tequila.
And now, the Tall Mike Wine Podcast.
The cell phones have been silenced. The wine is poured. And just like that, the podcast begins. Welcome to the Tall Mike Wine Podcast. I'm Mike Stone, your tall, wine-obsessed host of the wine podcast that's not all about wine. The wine podcast like no other. Heard in 32 countries on 5 continents and in 42 of these United States and the District of Columbia. From Puyallup, Washington to Levittown, New York. From Martinez, California to Lebanon, Pennsylvania. I thank you for finding us and hanging out for the conversation. Now help me out with growing the podcast. If you like the show, tell your friends. If you like the show, get on Apple Podcasts and give us a rating and or a review. If you really like it, blast it out on social media. And for your efforts, I will reward you with your very own set of Tall Mike Wine podcast coasters. Drop me an email at tallmikewine@gmail.com or message me on Instagram at tallmikewine, and I'll drop some in the mail. The holiday season is here. Time for entertaining. You need coasters. Okay, it's time for episode 23 to begin. My guest is standing by via Zencastr from her home in Long Beach, California. I'm at home here in Novato, California, but she visited Nicholson Ranch Winery a few months ago with some friends celebrating a birthday. I took them on a tour of the winery and the underground caves, and we had a blast. As we were wrapping up our time together, I let them know about my podcast, which is what I typically do. And someone in the group said, she has a podcast. I believe this was my first encounter with a fellow podcaster. We had a nice chat and agreed to guest on each other's show. I was recently a guest on her podcast. What's it called? Her podcast is called Swipe East, Swipe West. It is a podcast about dating and how the customs around dating differ from region to region of the country. Let's find out more. My guest is Ashley Davis, podcaster. Hello, Ashley.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I'm glad to have you. I wish you were here in the room with me, though. I wish you were in the Bombay room at Nicholson Ranch. It's so much more fun to be face-to-face.
I know. I wish I was there, too, drinking more wine there, but I'll have to settle with my glass next to me right now.
Okay, so she's got wine in her glass. We'll talk about what she's got. We'll talk about what I got, because that's a thing that we do on the show. How are things in Long Beach?
Not too bad. It's been kind of gray down here. Been gray and gloomy, but, powering through, waiting for the holidays, so.
It's not a return of the June gloom in December?
It feels like it is, which is very strange. Very strange.
We had a few of those days here very recently. Very cold and wet feeling, that kind of clammy feeling.
Yeah, it rained the last couple of days. It was very surprising.
Oh my God. People in LA, when it rains, they freak out.
They either freak out or they're like, it's like they've seen snow for the first time type of reaction, like rain. What is this?
They go outside like, whoa, it's water, man.
Yeah, from the sky.
Crazy. All right, so give me the scoop on Swipe East, Swipe West. Where did the idea come from?
So I'm originally from the East Coast and moved to Long Beach from Philadelphia 2 years ago now, a little over 2 years ago. And when I moved here, I thought I was going to have no problem meeting people, no problem dating. That did not happen. I had huge culture shock. It was a lot tougher than I thought, just in terms of like navigating the distance, navigating different personalities, because Philly, it's a much smaller city. and it's a lot easier to get around and like mingle with people. And I just had the complete opposite when I moved here. So through that, I thought, and talking to some people that also had similar experiences, I thought, why not share that with people? So started the podcast from there, and now have expanded to interviewing people like yourself from other cities and getting to know their experiences in places even like Milwaukee. I interviewed someone from Italy just about how it's culturally different and how people have navigated their experiences there as well.
So there are dating cultures regionally. Okay, so what's like one of the main things that's really different about dating in LA versus dating in Philadelphia?
One of the biggest things is the distance factor, I would definitely say, as a barrier. In Philly, I think you can get in an Uber and get across the city in 10 to 15 minutes, and Uber is $20 max when it's surging.
Mm-hmm.
In LA, with traffic, it can take you like 3 hours, depending
right, you get
on
the
where
10
you are.
and go to the 110 to the 5 or the 405 or the 710, blah, 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 all the highways.
Exactly. So I found, and I first moved here and I was like, I wanted to go everywhere. I wanted to meet everyone. I wanted to explore. So I was, coming from Long Beach to like West Hollywood and willing to drive like an hour and a half to meet people. And I would be out, a guy would be talking to me and he'd ask where I'd live. And I distinctly remember this interaction. This guy was like, "Oh, can I buy you a drink?" We got to the bar, and as we're ordering, he asked where I lived. And I said Long Beach. And he goes, "No, you're too far." And he just walked away and left me at the bar to pay for my drink. And I was like, "What? Seriously?"
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
that's, I guess people are rude in any city you go to, but that's above and beyond. That's crazy. I know that before I moved to the Bay Area, I lived in Long Beach for about a year. And as I was looking for work in restaurants down there, I was finding decent jobs in Long Beach, but the real, the better management jobs in restaurants were going to be more in LA proper. And so I ended up with a job in West Hollywood. And when I would introduce myself, talk to people that I worked with, people in the restaurant, "Where do you live, Mike?" I'd say Long Beach. I could feel their neck snap as they did a double take. Like, "What? You commute up here?" I'm like, "Yeah, I do. I didn't really know when I took the job, like everybody in LA has a drive, they get on the freeway, they drive. It's a thing. It's what they do."
Yeah, people just don't want to leave their area. They're very tied to where they live. And especially if you're commuting for work, they don't then want to have to commit to see a significant other after being in their car all day, I guess.
They just want to stay in their own little neighborhood.
Yeah, and that goes to their friend group too. Like I find it's very hard to infiltrate a friend group without some sort of connection. Whereas like in Philly, people are a lot more open there. So I could like talk to someone at the bar and actually have a chance of meeting them again. Whereas here it's very like networky. So I would meet someone at the bar, even like a girl, just like to be friends with.
Mm-hmm.
And she'd be like, "Oh yeah, totally. Like, let's hang out." And I would get like ghosted, just trying to make friends, So I was ghosted. Yeah. Even with that here. So that was another thing that was different.
I'm sensing maybe the people of LA are a little more, I hate to say it, shallow than the good folks of Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love.
Yeah. And eventually I found friends. Like I used like Bumble BFF and, made connections through there. So it's not everyone, but a good majority compared to Philly from my personal experience, at least.
And then of course the pandemic happened. And I want to touch on the pandemic a little bit later on. But first I want to know, so you started a podcast because there was this thing happening where people were really different and kind of weird. But had you had the idea of starting a podcast in your head already? What made you start a podcast?
So podcasting wasn't even on my radar at all, actually. And I actually didn't used to be a huge podcast person even. Like I listened to some more so like mysteries, like thrillers, like Serial was actually
Huge.
like the main podcast I listened to.
Huge genre. Mysteries.
Yeah.
True
I'm a
crime.
big SVU girl. Yeah, exactly. And I actually had ideas of doing like, I wanted to do like video and get into like cartoons and doing like dating stories through like videos and skits. And I was working with a friend that I had met who lived in New York, and we had some ideas, but just when the pandemic hit and Black Lives Matter movement and everything, just it was really hard just getting people motivated. So, and I'm not a video person. Like I'm terrible at reels and TikToks and all of that. And it wasn't something I could achieve on my own. So I was telling people about like, what can I do that's creative, and sharing my experiences and in the realm of dating, which is something that I like talking about with people, because I think it's just something, human connection is really important. And someone actually gave the idea to me about podcasting and audio, which is something a lot more achievable on your own. So I started looking into that more and bought some books and started teaching myself editing and looking up videos, and was like, why not try it? And you know what, if I'm not good at it, at least I tried. So that's kind of where I got that
shockingly
idea.
Easy to start your own podcast.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of work still, but compared to like other things, like doing it on your own, it's a lot easier than trying to a whole like film production type of thing.
Right. You know, YouTubers are out there, and it sounds like maybe you had an idea for something like little vignettes or animated things.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty complicated.
Yes.
But the podcast thing is so easy. I explain this to people all the time. They say, "Oh, you have a podcast?" I'm like, "Yeah." I figured it out all on my own. I couldn't find a wine podcast that I liked. Somebody said, "Well, make your own." I'm like, I don't know. That's, technology. I'm not. And I really just researched it a tiny bit and was like, oh, that's not that complicated. Okay. And here I am. I have a podcast. I've had it for almost a year. And you have a podcast. How long have you had this podcast?
Almost a year too, actually. It'll be a year in March.
Very cool. So you have a glass of wine at your side there.
Yes.
Will you share with me what's in your glass?
Yes, it is from Monochrome Winery, which is a winery in Paso, Robles, an all-white winery, which is rare for that region because I know they're mostly focused on red wines up there.
Yeah, they grow the big reds. They grow Cabs, Syrahs, their own varietals. It's hot there. The big reds really thrive. This winery is all white?
Yes, it's all white wines. And I'm actually more of a white wine drinker. And when I went to Paso, I had no idea that it was mostly reds. So I'll drink red wine when it's there, but it's just not my preference. So my friends humored me for the all white winery that we found. So I'm drinking their Barrel Distortion is what it's called.
Okay. And what's in it?
It says it's 94%. I'm going to butcher this. Albariño and
very nice. You said it perfectly.
Perfect. Okay, and this
you could have rolled your R if you wanted to be more authentic. Albariño.
And then 6% Gewurztraminer.
Okay, you butchered that.
Yeah, that one I did bad.
Gewurztraminer.
Okay, I'm not even going to try.
That's a very common in Germany, and Albariño very common in Spain and Portugal. So that's an interesting blend.
Yeah.
How is it?
It's good. It's like not too sweet. It's like a little sweet, but not terribly sweet, and like kind of tangy, I guess. I'm not, that's a terrible description, I feel like, but I enjoy it.
If you were to say, tell me when the perfect time to drink this wine would be, or where, or with what meal, what would you say?
I feel like on like a nice warm evening outside with a light dish.
That sounds great. I'm ready for that meal right now. Although it's evening here, I'm drinking white wine as well. We'll talk about that in just a little bit. This sounds like a job interview question, which I love. Where do you see your podcast progressing to? Other media, TV? Is there a screenplay in there somewhere? And I only ask that because you are in LA and everybody's writing a screenplay.
I think, hopefully the sky's the limit. It's still pretty early on, and I feel like it's already changed a lot, and it's in its second season. So the first season focused a lot on Philly and LA directly. So just direct comparison between the two, because that's what I knew the most about. And so now I'm exploring those other cities, and I'm hoping that I could take that and do something else with it. So maybe taking that into something with TV, maybe something else that's a bigger idea. But I still have a full-time job right now. So this is something else I'm doing. So it's definitely going to be about finding the time and thinking creatively and getting the traction. So growing it's the biggest thing, the hardest thing to do.
Mm-hmm. The name itself, just to me, sounds like a TV show.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like, I don't know, in my head, I'm like, I could imagine it like being not like reality TV like the Kardashians, but like a TV where you actually go to cities and interview real people on their experience. Like that could be a direction, or it could be something fictional. I feel like
Or you
could do
set
a
them
lot
up,
with it.
you set people up on dates in different cities. You just go in and meet people, find the transplants, and see how they are.
What I really like about the concept, to toot my own horn, I guess, that I think is different is like the fact that it's on different cities, because I just didn't realize that a dating experience could be different based on where you lived until I moved somewhere totally different. Because like I grew up in Connecticut and I moved to Philly, and it's East Coast. So they're different, but they're still kind of similar types of people. Right. So until I moved like 3,000 miles away, I didn't really pick up on how different somewhere could be.
Well, and I think Los Angeles is its very own unique animal too,
yes.
In the whole the freeways that you talked about, plus just the people. A lot of people there are transplants, and they're all about themselves. And I don't want to say that in like a mean way. I just mean they're all about themselves. They're trying to break into the business. They're trying to break into entertainment, actors, singers, comedians, whatever. They're working on their career, and they're working a full-time job usually. So I don't know. Maybe that lends itself to being somewhat self-absorbed. I don't know if you've run into that.
With some people, yes, but I think that also makes it hard when dating that, like even myself included, it's not as much of a priority. Like people are so busy doing so many other things. Like it's dating someone, it's either not a priority, or they're very hyper-focused on dating someone just because they don't want to deal with dating around other people. So they hyper focus on you for a relationship. It's like one extreme or the other.
That's weird.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your dating life. I have this idea, being the host of a dating podcast, you'd be out there multiple nights a week in the trenches of the dating wars. But that's not really true, is it?
No, it is not true.
So the pandemic came along, and that screwed everything up for the most part. But when you moved to LA, did you think, I'm going to meet my soulmate because it's time? Did you have you date for a certain time during your 20s and it's fun. And then at some point you like say, okay, well, I need to settle down, or I don't know. Walk me through it.
Yeah. I mean, I came here single, and mostly was single just because I knew it was going to be I was moving across the country, and I didn't want to be tied to anyone back home and like having to call someone. And I wanted to have open like experiences and be able to meet people and really like embrace the city. But I didn't really come in with expectations of this is now my time to meet someone. But I wanted I wanted to just see what happened, I guess. And I was like, maybe I will. Like, I don't know, maybe I won't. But I guess I didn't think that it was going to be so rough out here that it was going to never happen. Like I thought maybe it would. And it's kind of gotten to the point where I'm like, I'm not so sure if it will. But I definitely, when I first moved here, like pre-pandemic, like I was trying, like I was, actively using the apps. Like I said before, I was going out a lot, like trying to meet people, whether it was for friendships or for romantic reasons. And then obviously the pandemic hit, and that definitely messed things up because you had to be really careful about who you were associating with for a while. Yeah, it's just continued to be tough, but I'm also not really a dating app person. I'm much more of an in-person person, which made the pandemic that much harder. So I'm trying to be more optimistic that it'll be easier now that things are opening up now.
It's weird though how things like are sort of opening up and then they're not really opening up. I always have to look at the door of the grocery store before I go in. Do I need to have my mask on? Are they requiring it? Are they recommending it?
Yeah.
What's happening? I live in a county here in the Bay Area, which actually has lifted the mask mandate indoors, but it's one of the only ones. And because the numbers are super low, because we're all very well-behaved liberals here in Marin County, California, and everybody's had their shot. I think we're at like 90%.
Oh, wow.
But then when I go to work in Sonoma County, I got to have my mask on because the people are not as vaccinated. I mean, they're pretty vaccinated. I mean, we're in California. It's pretty good. When I was a guest on your show, we talked about the olden days of dating, pre-internet, pre-dating apps and smartphones. I know it's really difficult for people of the current dating generation to imagine life without those things. But you seem to kind of gravitate to that, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
Because why?
Well, I mean, one, like I said, I work a 9 to 5, so I feel like I'm on technology and smartphones and computers all day. So it's nice to take a break from it. But I feel like people are just so connected and so tied to their identity online that it makes it hard to connect with someone offline sometimes, and that I connect better with people in person. I'm not a good texter. I don't really enjoy texting unless I'm using it to like make a plan or I have a specific reason to text someone. Like I don't normally text people and just say like, how was your day? And I feel like now with like,
you're not going to send me 100 emojis or memes or things like that all day long.
No, I have some friends that are like that. And that's, that's how their personalities are. But like, especially with like dating apps now, like I feel like it's funny because back in the day, like when they were first came out, there was this whole taboo about, oh, you met someone on a dating app, like we got to lie and say met them at a bar or wherever. And now it's so commonplace, which is fine. But I just feel like it's so surface level and superficial. And it's when you first meet someone at least, and now there's just so many options. It's making dating so much more difficult. And I just like don't want to deal with that. Like I'd rather go and actually meet someone, catch a vibe for who they are, get to know their actual personality, not their digital personality. Because I've actually met people, maybe even in person, and then for whatever reason we talk digitally for like, and I know you and I talked about this too, we'll talk digitally for even a few weeks or months, and I think that they're one way, and then I meet them again in person and they're like not who I thought they were, and I've wasted months of my time with this person who was just a completely different, it was like a facade of who their personality is.
Their digital personality. And we did talk about this on your podcast, Swipe East, Swipe West, found wherever podcasts are found. You meet somebody on the app. You like their pictures. You email them, things go well. Pretty soon you're texting, trying to make a date, but the date can't happen right away because everybody's busy. And then pretty soon you're texting each other a little bit, and you have this time to craft a text. It's not live conversation. And you can be a more clever version of yourself, more interesting version of yourself. And then weeks go by, you finally meet, and you get your pheromones in the same room together. And it's like,
yeah,
that's disappointing.
Yeah. Or even like with photos, like everyone edits their photos these days. So you don't even know what's real and like what's not. And I just feel like people are so tied to like being online that it's taking away for who you are in real life. It's just hard. And I don't know. I'm just an old school person, I guess.
That's very refreshing to hear, because if you meet somebody and if you're going to have a relationship, I hate to break it to you, but you're going to have to spend a lot of time in the same rooms together. So you better be bringing your A game.
Yep.
I'm going to talk about what's in my glass now. This is a white wine. And I used some of it to marinate some prawns that are in the kitchen right now with some fresh herbs. We're recording this in the early evening on my day off. And on my day off, one of the main things I do is cook a phenomenal meal, because that's one of my real passions in life. This is a white wine from Switzerland. It might be my first white wine from Switzerland. It's called Chasselas. That's the name of the grape. And it's a very simple label. It says Chasselas Swiss white wine. There's even a little Swiss Army knife cross on the label. You see it right there? There's a little cross.
Yes, I see it. Oh, I like the Alps too.
There's a picture of the mountain, Chasselas. It's one of those sort of obscure white grapes. It's a grape that is grown primarily in Switzerland and in a few other countries. If you think about all the grapes in the whole wide world of wine, it's not one of the big ones. But this is delicious. It's actually kind of medium-bodied, but it's not heavy. It's got this great, like, tropical fruit thing going on, kind of like peaches and lychee nut.
Ooh.
Yeah, it's quite lovely. I might have to track this down again when we get around to summer.
Yeah, it sounds
next
good.
year. I'm going to put pictures of my wine, and you can send me a picture of your wine, right?
Yes, I can.
It'll be in the Instagram recap of this episode. And if you're not following me on Instagram, you can at Tall Mike Wine, and you can follow Swipe East, Swipe West at Swipe East, Swipe West. Keep it simple. You told me a little bit about this before, your life in wine. You're not a huge wine person, and it's mostly white wine for you. But tell me about how your life and wine come together.
Yeah, I never used to be a big wine person. I feel like I didn't actually realize that I liked wine until I moved out west and started drinking nice wine, because I used to go to the store and I listened to your episode with Stacey Briscoe, and I feel like I was similar to her,
Okay.
where I was buying like the Franzia, like the cheap like $10 bottles at the store, and was like, this is wine, like I don't like this because I was buying like the cheap bottles. So then I started going to like nicer wineries. Like I've been to Temecula, I went to Paso. And once I started tasting like actual wine, I was like, oh, like wine's not bad. And I feel like now I fall into that stereotype where I'm a millennial that sits at home after a long day and would prefer to pour myself a glass of wine now than tequila. So I feel like that's how I decompress and like wind down, is with like a quality glass, not a Franzia. So I feel like that's how I relate to wine now. Like I enjoy going to wineries. I enjoy drinking that, but I never used to back in the day.
Hey, but some days tequila is your friend, right?
Yes, when I'm out at a bar, I will order a tequila, but probably not a wine. Wine is more of like my at-home, like relaxing, casual drink.
It's hit and miss ordering wine in bars anyway, because most of the wines by the glass, unless you're in a really nice restaurant, most of the wines by the glass are just shit. It's like, what can we buy for really cheap? And if somebody orders a glass of wine, we'll make a nice margin on it. So when I go to most bars, or even restaurants where it's not a big deal, I order a cocktail.
Yeah.
Or a nice beer if they have a lot of beers on tap. It just depends. It really just depends. Or I bring my own bottle. If I'm going out to dinner, 9 times out of 10, I bring my own wine.
That's always a good way to go too.
Because I have a lot of wine here. I kind of collect it, but I don't want to go somewhere and be like, that's okay. And if I bring my own, I know I'm going to like it.
Yeah, I'm really into like I like joining wine clubs now. Like I feel like in Paso I joined wine clubs, and I know a bunch of my friends like joined when we were up in Sonoma, because then you're going to like what you get. It's delivered to your door unless you want an excuse to make a trip up and pick it up. And then you always have something available for yourself, for a gift. It's like my new thing now.
Well, the great thing about that too is that you have visited the winery, you have connection to it, and a lot of times it's a smaller winery where nobody will have ever seen those bottles before.
Yes.
I mean, I'm speaking of the experience at Nicholson Ranch anyway. Small winery, we don't distribute it outside of the winery. So if you have the wine at your house, people will be like, what is this? Oh, I'm going to go try and find some of this at the little wine shop down the street. And you can say, good luck with that.
Exactly.
Yeah, this wine's nice. It's juicy. That's a good way of putting it. This wine, juicy. The first one you had, you really liked and thought, wine is interesting. I think this could be a thing for me. Do you remember what wine that was? Like your turning point wine?
My turning point. I mean, I feel like it was when I went my trip to Paso Robles. So that was like the first time I went and was old enough to actually go to nice wineries and appreciate it.
And not think, God, this is expensive.
Yeah, exactly. Because and that was this past March, because like I had been even to Temecula before that, but I just didn't really like think about it. Like I was kind of like, oh, I went to a winery, got a glass of wine. We went to like a champagne winery, but I had always liked champagne. So that was never, wasn't really a turning point for me. Okay. But Paso was the first time that I was like, oh, like this isn't bad, and I'm drinking reds that I actually don't mind, and I normally hate reds. It was like, oh, this is worth like the $30, the $40. I'm going to join a wine club now. And after that, I think I had a newfound appreciation for wine after that.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So did you go to Paso just for wine tasting? Was that a wine trip?
Yeah, it was like part wine trip, part just decompress girls weekend, but we mostly went for the wineries because there isn't much. I mean, there's some shopping and stuff, but it's one of those towns that everything kind of shuts down at like 10 p.m. So it's kind of surrounding the wine, and at least in my opinion. And they also have this area called Tin City, which is pretty newer and pretty cool. And that's where Monochrome was. But they also had like a cider place and some beer places there too, which was pretty awesome.
I've not been to Paso Robles. It's on my list of places I need to check out, because they basically built a wine region out of like the desert. That's why there's not a lot of other stuff there. You told me when I was on your show, and we just talked about this, you really aren't into the apps, the internet dating. You'd like to meet someone the old-fashioned way, like be fixed up or have it be totally random. So what I want to do now is put it out there into the world. Ashley Davis is available and looking. What would you say would be a few important traits for you in finding your ideal man?
Oh man, I feel like I'm like on a dating show on the spot now.
Here we are, the dating game.
Oh man. I mean, I feel like some of these are probably going to be cliche, but I would definitely say communication is probably the most important thing. I think in some of my past failed relationships or flings or whatever, it's been because people haven't been like very communicative on their feelings or what they've been looking for or not looking for. So that's definitely a big thing. And then I guess hand in hand in that is like honesty, like being honest and communicative. So like open and with what they want and like feelings and those things, and trust, just being trusting, because I have a lot of male friends that are purely platonic friends, and that caused a lot of problems in relationships too, which I think led to
dudes
like,
be getting jealous.
Yeah, exactly. Like trust issues. So I think those three things, which I feel like, I don't know, I feel like those are backbones to like any good relationships, but they're actually very hard qualities to find in a romantic partner. But I feel like you can find in the friendships, actually, thinking about it as I'm saying this out loud. So yeah, I think those are the big three for me.
In listening to a few episodes of your podcast, I hear you and your contemporaries. And when I say your contemporaries, I'm talking about people way younger than me. And this phrase keeps coming up, and I love it. Shared goals, shared relationship goals. That means you've found someone who also wants to maybe settle down like you want to settle down.
Yeah, like that. And even just like same, like this, looking for the same thing. So I know I had actually a couple come on, one after the other, Dave and Brittany, and they both, it's funny, I hadn't even released their episodes when I had recorded with both of them. And they both were saying the same thing about how like just even being on the same page of what you're looking for and like what's important for you as far as like values. So like Dave is a musician. So like for him, like he'll have some late nights with music. And he was saying in past relationships that bothered some of his past girlfriends. Whereas Brittany was like, she knew that it had nothing to do with like him neglecting her, not caring about her, but that's just something he cares about. And that's something she was fine with. So even just things like that, like, do your values align?
Like for me, do you understand that we're going to have a wine rack that's bigger than most people's?
Or even going back to like the texting thing, I'm not a big texter. I take sometimes long to respond. I've had some people that they need text responses and attention 24/7. Like even things like that can cause huge issues in relationships. Like, to be honest, like I've gotten called out for things like that before. So those small things can make a huge difference.
To me, that's a general red flag.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to me, it would be, but for someone else, it might not be. Like for someone else, like you might find someone that's an important value, like responsiveness. Like, I don't know, maybe. So
what's, we talked about all of the more cerebral things that you might be looking for. Now let's get physical. What kind of man are you attracted to?
It's so funny because my friends always get mad at me that I don't have a type, because I'm always pointing out like people that have no similarities at all. And they're like, how can we help you when you're all over the map? But yeah, I don't know. I feel like I don't have anyone specific. I'm really just attracted to like personality. And if I had to like say someone like in general, they're normally like European looking. They're normally skinny. Like they're not big, like muscular, like gym rats. They normally have like brown hair, but I also am keen on gingers, but I don't discriminate. I've been very attracted to blondes. It doesn't really matter to me. I've been attracted to like hipsters, rock stars, all over the place.
That's interesting because you're still fairly young. You haven't had a lot of relationships. I find that if you find somebody who's more like my age and you look at their multiple relationships over time, the types do reveal themselves.
Yeah.
So you might not be able to say what you're into, but if you look back, you might see a pattern.
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
Well, now there you have it. There's what Ashley Davis is looking for. We'll try and send out some love and see if we get some, some suitable suitors for you.
Yeah, hopefully.
So what else is happening? You finished the podcast for the year. What's coming up next year on the podcast? Do you have people lined up?
Yes, I have a few people on the back burner I've reached out to, so hopefully I can interview with them. Yeah, I have some people in like Alaska, Austin. Whoa. I'm really trying to expand more, so get like more men on the podcast, get some people from LGBTQ plus community, people with different relationship styles. So that's what I'm trying to achieve, but it's just about getting people that are willing to come on and talk about it.
I can relate to that. Having a podcast is fun. Once you get the guests, it's a blast to interview them. And then, the editing and getting it uploaded is really gratifying. But the search for guests is a challenge.
Yeah, especially early on in the podcast when you're starting out. It'd be hard.
I hope that you have a great holiday season. Are you traveling?
I'm staying more local. I might go to Death Valley a couple days and hide out.
That sounds awesome. Have you been there before?
No, it's on my list, and I feel like this is the perfect weather time to go.
That's an area of California I haven't explored, even though every time somebody says they're going to Joshua Tree, I'm like, oh.
It's cold in Joshua Tree right now, actually. Pretty
cold.
Yeah, well, cold, like I think probably 50s, maybe 40s, like chilly and very cold at night, I would say.
Okay. Do you have anything else you want to say to my audience, the Tall Mike Wine podcast audience?
I don't think so. I think,
okay.
No.
I'll cut that part out then.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'm going to read the close then. Okay. You ready for it?
Yeah.
The Tall Mike Wine podcast was conceived and is written, produced, edited, and maintained by yours truly. The interview was recorded via a website called Zencaster. To see pictures of the wines we've been enjoying and other behind-the-scenes pictures from my life in wine and food, follow me on Instagram at Tall Mike Wine. Do you need coasters with my picture on them? Of course you do! Send me an email, tallmikewine@gmail.com with requests, questions, comments, or anything like that. Thanks for joining us, Ashley Davis. Find her at Swipe East, Swipe West, also on Instagram. I'll be back again soon, probably after Christmas. Wow, Christmas. Ho, ho, ho. I can't even. Christmas. Make it merry. I'm Mike Stone. Cheers.